Hey everyone, tonight I'm going to be going over the answer key for the Module 4 practice test to help you get any questions answered that you might need help with. Number 1 says, which of the following statements are true? Select all that apply. This means that there might be more than one statement that you can circle. So when it says select all that apply, make sure that you are really paying attention to what the statements say, because there's probably going to be more than one answer. In part A, it says 2 is less than -3. That is not true. Positives are greater than negatives. In part B, -4 is less than -5 is not true. -4 is actually closer to 0. So it's greater. That means that part C is true. -4 is greater than -5 because -4 is closer to 0. In part D, -3 is greater than 2 is not true. Negatives are not greater than positives. And part E is true. 0 is bigger than -45. In number 2, it says put the integers in order from least to greatest. So I'm going to go from most negative to least negative. So in this one, -15 is the most negative. -3 is next, then -2, then 0, then +1. Number 3 says the table shows the freezing points to the nearest Kelvin for 6 solvents. Carbon tetrachloride freezes at -23 Kelvin. Between which two substances is the freezing point of carbon tetrachloride? Explain your reasoning or show your work. So this is the question that I'm trying to answer. So what I'm going to do on this one is I'm actually going to take these substances here and I'm going to order them from least to greatest. So diethyl ether is going to be first. It's the most negative. Then ethanol. Then carbon disulfide. Then acetone. Then chloroform. And then aniline. And then I'm going to look at the number that they gave me, -23 degrees Kelvin. And -23 degrees Kelvin is going to fit in between -64 and -6. So it's going to be between chloroform and aniline. So between -64 and -6. Number 4 says to write an integer that best represents a loss of 5 yards on a play during a football game. Well, if I'm losing 5 yards, that means I'm going backward. And the meaning of 0 in this situation is going to be no change, because if I'm not gaining or losing, nothing's happening. In number 5, it says it is 15 degrees below 0, so we're still at -15. And here our 0 is going to be 0 degrees because we're comparing that -15 degrees to 0. The opposite of -132. So the opposite of -132 is going to be +132. The opposite of 8. And we're going to work our way in to out. So the opposite of +8 is -8, and the opposite of a negative is a positive. Number 8 says, what is the opposite of the opposite of the absolute value of -10? So in this one, I'm going to do my absolute value first. Remember, whatever goes into absolute value comes out positive. So for this one, it's going to be the opposite of the opposite, and the absolute value of -10 is +10. Now I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to get the opposite of negative 10, and the opposite of negative 10 is positive 10. So just remembering on that one that the absolute value of negative 10 comes out positive first. Number 9 says which situation is not best described by a negative integer. So all the situations that are represented by negative integers are not the correct answer. So a withdrawal of $45 is a negative integer. A loss of 12 yards is a negative integer. A fine of $15, that means you have to pay for something that you've done wrong, like returning your library book back late or getting a ticket, is going to be represented by a negative integer. And then this one says 10 feet above sea level. Above sea level means a positive integer. So D is our correct answer here. Number 10 says Princess Anna hiked up the North Mountain to find Queen Elsa in her ice castle. That was 1,200 feet above sea level. So I'm going to draw a mountain. And we're up 1,200 feet above sea level. And it says Ariel's grotto is 250 feet below sea level. So I'm going to have some water here. And then Ariel's grotto is going to be down here, a little cave. Okay, that's what a grotto is. It's a cave. And that's going to be at negative 250. And I want to know the distance between these two things. To figure out the distance between these two things, I've got 1,200 feet above sea level plus the 250 feet below sea level. That's going to put them 1,450 feet apart. Number 11, I'm ordering the fractions from least to greatest. The first fraction I'm going to write is negative 1 1/4. It is the only mixed number. It is the only number greater than negative 1. So that's going to be the most negative. The next thing I noticed is that this fraction, and this fraction can be compared easily using the same denominator. So I'm going to change negative 1/2 into negative 8/16, negative 5/8 into negative 10/16, and then I've got a negative 9/16 to compare. Negative 10/16 is going to be the next most negative. So negative 5/8 is going to come next. Negative 9/16 is going to come after that because negative 10/16 and negative 9/16 are going to be right next to each other. And then negative 8/16 is going to come after that. And the reason why I know negative 4/9 comes last, it is the closest to 0, is because negative 4/9 is greater than negative 1/2. So when I compare these two numbers to each other, negative 4/9 is actually closer to 0 because it's not 1/2 or bigger. So I did a small comparison to 1/2 to figure out that number comes last. For 12, 13, and 14, we're going to use those different look-fors that we talked about way back before break. So for negative 3/4 and negative 5/6, I know that 4 and 6 can be made into the same denominator, which is my favorite way to compare. So I'm going to multiply 4 by 3. So I'm going to get negative 9/12. And then here I'm going to multiply by 2. So I get negative 10/12. Negative 10/12 is actually further away from 0. So negative 3/4 is greater than negative 5/6. For number 13, I've got a mixed number and I've got an improper fraction. I'm going to change 22/15, into a mixed number first. So 15 goes into 22 one time. And then 7 is left over. So I'm comparing negative 1 and 9/16 to negative 1 and 7/15. I'm going to ignore the whole numbers because they're the same, and I'm going to compare these two numbers. And I use a comparison to 1/2 here. because 9/16 is bigger than 1/2 and 7/15 is smaller than 1/2. So the -1 and 7/15 is actually closer to 0. So -1 and 9/16 is less than -22/15. For number 14, looking at the numerators this time, I can make the 3 into a 15 pretty easily. So I'm going to have -15 over 124 and -15 over 250. Remember, when we're comparing denominators, we're talking about how many people we have to share with. So like if I have to share something like a pizza, do I want to share it with 124 people or do I want to share it with 250 people? And then when we're talking about negatives, the less people I have to share with, the bigger the slice is. So the further away from 0 I actually am. So I would want to share with 124 people, which means that those slices are bigger. That means that that number is further away from 0. So that was a tricky one. 15, 16, and 17, we're just finding absolute value. Remember that absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line, and distance cannot be negative. We talked about that a lot this chapter, and I feel like I keep repeating it. The absolute value of -5 is +5. The absolute value of 12 is 12. And the opposite, so we're going to do this first, this absolute value first. So the opposite of the absolute value of -4, I'm going to do this first, and I get the opposite of +4, which is -4. 18 and 19, we're going to find absolute value first and then compare. So the absolute value of -6 is +6, and 6 is equal to 6. The absolute value of -9 is +9. The absolute value of -5 is +5. And 9 is greater than 5. So to write the statement correctly, we're going to have the absolute value of -9 is greater than the absolute value of -5. For number 20, I'm going to draw a quick picture over here to remind myself that this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, this is 3, and this is 4. So this is plus plus, this is minus plus, this is minus minus, and then this is plus minus. So 3, -1 is positive, negative, so that's going to be quadrant 4. This next one, -3.5, -4, is negative, negative, so that's 3. 0, 6 is going to be on the y-axis. If it's on the y-axis, it is not considered part of any quadrant, so none. -4.5, 1.75 is going to be quadrant 2. 3 3/4, 1.5 is going to be quadrant 1. They're both positive. And then same thing for this one. 3, 0 is on the x-axis, so it is not considered part of any quadrant. So you should have 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 2 that belong in none. Number 21 says Greta is plotting a point on the coordinate plane with the coordinates -13 and 12. If the location of the point is in quadrant 4, remember back up here, quadrant 4 is positive, negative. That means that it has to be 12, -13. Because I want the positive to come first, the negative to come second. Number 22 says, which of the following statements is true regarding the reflection of point Z, which is -2 3/4, 1.5. Again, we have a select all that apply. So all the answers that are correct, please circle them. So part A says when this point is reflected across the x-axis, the x-coordinate reverses its sign. That is incorrect. So A is not a correct answer. When you reflect across the x-axis, the x stays the same and the y changes. The reflection of the point, -2 3/4, 1 1/2 across the x-axis can be represented by -2 3/4, 1 1/2. That is not true because the y coordinate did not change, so B is not true. When this point is reflected across the x-axis, the x coordinate stays the same and the y coordinate reverses. That is true. The reflection of -2 3/4 and 1 1/2 across the x-axis can be represented by 2 3/4, -1 1/2. Is not true because the x coordinate did not stay the same. And when when this point is reflected across the y-axis, the x coordinate reverses its sign and the y coordinate stays the same is true. So E is going to be our other answer. So you should have C and E circled on this one. For number 23, it says find the distance between the 2 points, -56, 30 and -56, 50. On this one, they are on the same side of the y-axis, so I'm actually going to subtract the two values. When we talked about this section, we found the absolute value of each y coordinate. Remember that the absolute value of a positive is a positive. So I'm just going to have 50 minus 30. It's going to be 20. So 20 units. For number 24, it says find the distance between the 2 points, 34, -43, and then -17, -43. So here I'm looking at the x coordinates. The x coordinates have different signs. That means that they're on opposite sides of 0. So when I take my absolute values, and I get 34 and 17, I'm actually going to add those values together because they don't have the same sign. Here they have the same sign, so I can subtract. When they have opposite signs, I'm going to add. So 7 plus 4 is 11, 51. So 51 units. 25 says the horizontal distance between 2 points is 6 units, and if one of the points is located at -4, 2, describe or show how you can find two sets of ordered pairs that are a horizontal distance of 6 units from point S. And then part B says what are those two ordered pairs. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this one. I'm going to show it using a picture because I'm a very visual person. So I actually drew a coordinate plane. And I'm going to plot the point -4, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Just to be consistent. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's -4, 2. So here's my point right here. This is point S. And I want it to be a horizontal distance of 6 units. So what I'm going to do is, because I need to find two ordered pairs that represent this horizontal distance of 6 units, I'm going to count 6 units to the right, and I'm going to count 6 units to the left. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's call this A. And then I'm going to go the other way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'll call that B. Each of these is 6 units away from the original point. And now I'm going to give what those two ordered pairs are. So A is 2, 2. And 4 plus 2 is 6. And then B is -10, 2. And 10 minus 4 is 6. You also could have done what I just did, what I added the numbers or I subtracted the numbers, you could figure out what value you need to get to in order to have 6 units of distance in between them. So I could say 4 plus what gets me 6, or something minus 4 gets me 6. And that would give me my ordered pairs as well. I'm just a very visual person, so I drew a picture of what that would look like, and we've been using coordinate planes to do these problems as well, so that's kind of a helpful visual. Number 26 says Roylene sketched a graph of her living room. She graphed the point -2.5, 1. So what I've done on this graph is I've gone every other line is 1. So every hash mark is 0.5. So -2.5, 1 is going to be all the way at the end of your graph and then up 1. So this is going to be C. That's going to represent the chair. And then it says the couch is located at C prime, a reflection of the point across the x-axis. So here's the x-axis, and I'm going to reflect to down here. So that's the couch. So I've got the chair and the couch. And then it says that the coffee table, C double prime, is going to be across the y-axis. So I'm going to go to the same distance across on the y-axis. So here's my C double prime. That's the coffee table. And it says what ordered pair represents the location of the coffee table. That's going to be 2.5, -1. That's C double prime. And it says plot the location of the coffee table on the coordinate plane. Well, I used the coordinate plane to find the location of the coffee table. The other thing I could have done is I could have taken this point. C is -2.5, 1. And if I want to reflect across X, I'm going to keep the X the same. And I'm going to flip the Y. So that's my C prime. And then I can go from C prime, -2.5, -1 across Y. Means that Y is going to stay the same and X is going to flip. And then I could just plot this point on the coordinate plane. So it completely depends on how you chose to solve that problem. So I'm going to use this thinking that I just did right here without the graph to do 27 and 28. So for 27, it says write the ordered pair that is a reflection of the point 254, -8.5 across the x-axis. That means that X is going to stay the same. So 254 stays the same. And Y is going to be the opposite. So 8.5. For number 28, it says across the Y-axis. So X is going to be the opposite. And Y is going to stay the same. So I'm going to change this to 73.5 as the opposite, and then -37.5 is going to stay the same. This is the end of the Module 4 practice test. If you did not get your question answered via this video, please feel free to talk to me about any questions that you might have. Please continue to look over your test, and there is some extra practice available in your textbook to help you prepare for tomorrow's test. Good luck.